So it's safe to say that Nottingham Forest are in a bit of a mess, with relegation looking ever more likely as a result of an incredibly challenging run of games to end the season, an ever-growing injury list, and maybe, just maybe, a lack of know-how. It looks pretty bleak. If relegation was to happen, then Forest would be even more ridiculed than they already are being for the fact that they signed 30 new players. Why did they sign 30 new players? For goodness sake, how disrespectful to the players that got the bloody club into the Premier League. Like, come on. There's absolutely no way that Forest are not going to be done by FFP. They get relegated, they're absolutely screwed. Well, maybe we had to sign 30 players because we lost 24 players as well. In some form this season, even players that have since arrived at the club, 24 transfers out have happened. The last week at Forest has been pretty defining. I'm going to go into more detail about that in just a moment. But it has really led to a lot of people complaining about the fact that this Forest team just don't have the same kind of identity as the one that got promoted. It doesn't have the same fight, the same drive, the same passion. And it is something I miss about the team last season. Look at how many times that team, it wasn't losing very often, but when it was, or when it was being challenged, it found a way to get something. Stoke City at home, losing 2-1 with moments left after Breeze Sammer decided to punch the opposition. We were down to 10 men. It was looking pretty poor. This Forest team this season, I absolutely guarantee would lose that game, but not last season. Now, having said that, the draw at Brentford this season, we actually did go and get an equaliser, but we were against the referees. I mean, 12 men. Like, you know, it's pretty difficult playing against 12 men. But how have we got to where we are now, where we are staring relegation in the face? How many of those 30 players have actually worked? Taiwo Awoniyi, 17 million from Union Berlin. Been great, but he's still very much learning. Also been injured at times. Dean Henderson, we went downhill since he got injured, so that's just an awful lot. Only his distribution isn't the best, but he's a bit of a one at Merchant, so we'll take that. Julian Biancon, I mean, he's been out all season, so, you know, he looked pretty good, but he did play. Moussa Niakhaté, brick wall, physicality at its absolute best. Only he's also been out most of the season, so, yeah. Omar Richards, another one. Literally another one. Another one. Nico Williams, a lot of potential, but £18 million, what the bloody hell, Forest. Wayne Hennessy, I mean, it's just a good bit of depth really, isn't it? But he was never really going to set the world alight. Brandon Aguilera, one for the future, not played for Forest. Lewis O'Brien looked absolutely fantastic at the start of the season, and he's now playing for Wayne Rooney. Harry Toffolo, a safe player, will give his best. Not the most glamorous option though. Jesse Lingard, great for team morale, was absolutely insane when we signed him, but he can't stay fit at all. Owen Mangala looks like a really special player, gifted on the ball, but even he's had his injury concerns. Emmanuel Dennis, up until last month, I was very, very happy to see him leave in the summer, but he does look pretty good now. Just pass the ball a bit more, mate, and we'll get somewhere. Cheick, great experience, great physicality, great on the ball, but he's also been injured for ages. Remo Freuler, technically an incredibly good player with a huge amount of experience, but he does go a bit missing at times. Morgan Gibbs-White, fantastic. Brilliant, one of the best young talents in the Premier League, but he is still very much developing. Hwang, not played for the club. Renan Lodi, bit of a slow start, but he looks fantastic now. Willy Bolly, brilliant, really good. Josh Bowler, not played for the club. Loic Bardet, never played for the club. Serge Aurier, fantastic. 12 games into this season and Forest had won just once in their first Premier League game back at the City Ground against West Ham. Forest would start the season by continuing to play their 3 centre-back formation from the team that got promoted. Despite this, though, Forest would concede 17 goals in the opening 8 matches. This being quite a familiar pattern, especially conceding goals in quick succession. Against Fulham we conceded 3 in a blink of an eye. Against Bournemouth, we had it completely and utterly in our hands against a fellow promoted side, 2-0 up, and we lost that game in the second half. So quite clearly a change was needed in terms of formation. We switched to a 2 at the back formation. Strangely, the first game in which we played this, It was the worst game of the whole season probably in the 4-0 loss at Leicester. After this game, unsurprisingly, Steve Cooper was coming under considerable pressure. I say unsurprisingly, really quite harshly, after what he'd done for the club the year before. And to go against all the odds, Steve Cooper will be awarded with a brand new contract, keeping complete faith in the man that got us into the Premier League. Even though it started totally disastrously, the switch to 2 centre-backs eventually would work, as well as the fact that the squad is quite clearly getting to know each other. Throughout the rest of October, November and particularly January, Forest would continue to improve and climb all the way to 13th in the Premier League table. A turning point really was a goalless draw away at Brighton. It was goalless, but a draw against the side pushing for European football this season away from home was a huge point. Then also going on to beat Liverpool was absolutely incredible. After the World Cup, we draw with Chelsea, beat Southampton away from home, our first away win all season. Also beating Leicester in the league as well. The only real lows during this entire period were losses to big sides like Arsenal 5-0, Man United 3-0, and yes, we did lose to Wolves as well. But we're now in January, and even though I've labelled that as a very good month, it's after January where it really does kind of completely and utterly fall off. After Steve Cooper's contract in October, Forest would actually fire a few of the recruitment team, which would probably tell you how some of the 30 signings had actually figured out and how they've been doing. Quite clearly, not as we'd expect. It was around that point as well when Dane Murphy, chief executive of the club, was also rumoured to be leaving. Fast forward to January, and of course, he would leave. This was seen as quite a big move, a man that quite clearly had played a big part in how we recruited and had risen up the championship table last season to our promotion. But it quite clearly had been a bit of a breakdown in communications behind the scenes. But as I say, it quite clearly broke down after January because the January window was a bit inconsistent. We signed 3 Brazilian players, Gustavo Scarpa, Danilo and Felipe. As well as this, Champions League winning goalkeeper Keylor Navas. We signed him of course because of the injury to Dean Henderson. As I've already mentioned, injuries continued to play a part from this moment onwards, as I continue to mention. We also signed 3 30 plus, probably past it players in Chris Wood, John Shelvey and Andre Ayew. All of them have unbelievably underwhelmed. The Chris Wood deal in particular being literal fraud in my opinion. After 3 games in his contract, it was agreed that he would permanently sign for the club. No matter how well he does, he's permanently a Forest player. I'm not one to dig out players, but everyone could admit that Chris Wood hasn't worked, and it just didn't seem like the right fit. I still have faith in him to try and turn it around. He's had a good career, but that deal, for the fact that we would also spend £15 million on him, God, it felt like a real bad move. When you look at the other 4 players that I labelled as good, Scarpa does look good, but he's hardly played. Danilo is young, still frail, but he does have a lot of flair about him, so a good signing. Navas, we can't really complain about him, we have only won once since he's been in net. Felipe is an absolute warrior, so he is, without a shadow of a doubt, a success. As I mentioned, injuries continue to play a part, not just Dean Henderson, but absolute warrior and crucial player Ryan Yates being injured. Players like Taro Awani, Musa Niakate being out injured long term, Cheick Kouyaté being out injured long term. Another crucial moment, having already lost Ryan Yates and Dean Henderson, was when Willy Boly and Scott McKenna both went down at the same time after the 7 minutes against Fulham. Meaning at that stage, we had just 2 fit senior centre-backs at the club in Joe Wall and Felipe. After Fulham, of course, we've not won, but a major turning point for me in terms of performance was the West Ham 4-0 defeat. That was totally and utterly unacceptable. And I'm talking about goals in quick succession. 4 goals in 14 minutes. We've been a shadow of what we were before, and now Steve Cooper coming under pressure again. He has been backed, but for how long? Injuries continuing to mount up. Renan Lodi now being injured. Scarpa's now injured again. Niakate might be out for a while still. I don't know. We'll see about that one. Yates being out again. Aurier being out. It's all adding up. And now, with just 8 games to go, we're into the bottom 3 of the Premier League for the first time since the start of January after that win at Southampton. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this mini review of the season so far and why I feel we are where we are. What do you think's the problem? Do you think we can survive? What do you think of all those players? Who's worked to you? Who's been the best signing? Who's been the worst signing? You name it. And I'll see you soon, everyone, for another video for my Man United preview coming out on Saturday. Up the Reds.